For this next session of the NPF Local Business Journalism Fellowship, we're going to be hearing from two speakers who have some important context and insight to share with us about the complex local business scene in the nation's capital. First, we're joined by Ebony Walton. She is the Director of Marketing and Communication for the Downtown DC Business Improvement District, or commonly known as DC BID. Ebony provides creative oversight to ensure that the BID's branding, marketing, and communication strategies are impactful and consistent. Her work involves planning events, managing a multi-million-dollar budget, and developing strategic marketing strategies for the BID. And Ebony is joined by Mark Simpson. Mark is the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the DC BID. He oversees research, policy, and project initiatives focusing on revitalizing the downtown core, specifically in the post-COVID era. His extensive private sector experience and academic training is in urban land and real estate development, multifamily construction, and urban design and planning. That's just a taste of their extensive professional background. So you can read their full bios on our website at nationalpress.org. Mark and Ebony, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
The timing for this conversation is great because so many of these journalists are covering their towns and their regions, dealing with some of the same things that are going on in DC. The impact of federal policies on local business, tourism, whether or not their tourism numbers have dropped, just so many things. So I thought we would start by having both of you share a little bit with us about your path to DC BID, what brought you there, and what you found when you first got to DC. So Ebony, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I am a proud graduate of Howard University, and interestingly enough, my major was broadcast journalism. And you know how it goes. You have to pay your dues, and I didn't want to go to Milwaukee and report on cats and dogs. And then I had a family, and I'm like, I need to get a job that pays a little bit more money. So I sought to work in my field, but had never heard of what a bid is, and did not know what that meant. Does anyone know? Does anyone know what a bid is? Have you heard of that term? One, two, don't be afraid. A few, okay. So it was very new, and it really, what we've come to understand is while we are a nonprofit isn't an industry, it's a tax designation. Our industry is place management. And so it took a while to really understand what a bid is and what it does. And I think the light bulb sort of went on when I saw how this really is a part of planning. There are stakeholders who agree to pay an additional tax, at least in DC, and bids take on many names. So I do want to do a little bit of level setting. You may hear BID, Business Improvement District, SID, Community Improvement District, Alliance, Partnership, all the same thing. Our goal is to make the area clean, safe, and friendly. That's the baseline. Because you all know, when you visit and you spend your money, you don't want to go anywhere that's not clean, it's not safe, and it's not friendly. So that's the basis of what we do. And in DC, we are one of 12 bids. So it's important that whenever you're talking about a bid, so especially here, we're the downtown DC bid because we're one of 2 bids that share the downtown area. And so that really, in a nutshell, was my path to getting here, and then really learning and understanding all the nuances of what a business improvement district does. In DC, we are not allowed to lobby. So we cannot, lobby council, and all of the bids in DC have to be enacted by DC council. So we have to go before DC council when you first come into being to say that we have enough property owners who agree to pay this additional tax. In DC, property owners are already paying a tax per commercial square foot. And the way that our bid is run is it's by square foot, not by value. Thank God for that, right? Oh my goodness. So, and I think have only 3 times raised the raised that bid tax rate. And so essentially what happened is 25 years ago when downtown was dull, dirty, and dangerous, it was the property owners who got together and said, look, What can we do? How do we bring some investment into this area to get it to where literally it is now? And so you all know it's cyclical. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the restaurants and the retail and then the workers or the visitors? I don't think anyone's figured it out, but you need all of it, because in order for a business to want to locate somewhere, they want to know that there is there's vibrancy, there's culture, and of course it is, affordable. So that really was my pathway, and 19 years later, I'm still here. So that's an anomaly too. People are like, oh my gosh, you've been at 19 years. God is good. So I'll let Mark talk.
I just love you always get me going in the morning, Ebony. I love that. My name is Mark Simpson. I oversee planning and economic development for the downtown bid. I've been working downtown in this work for about 2 years now. I've been at the DC bid for 1 year, and then I was at the Golden Triangle bid, which is our sister bid in downtown West, for a year prior. And then prior to that, I was working as a real estate developer on the redevelopment of the historic Walter Reed campus in Upper Ward 4. But I got the opportunity to come downtown, and I was really excited to work on downtown revitalization efforts writ large, and tackle the challenge of kind of what comes next for downtown in the post-pandemic era. My background and training is in architecture and urban planning, and so I was excited to come help contribute to the new iteration of what downtown's going to become, with the presence of remote work, changes in shopping and visitation habits, right, rise of internet shopping and its impact on retail, and so in the urban planning field, there's sort of a joke that downtown is in crisis about every 20 years or so. So this is my generation's time, and so I was excited to come down and help work on finding creative solutions to make our city better.
I've had 2 stints of living in D.C. I first came in '94, was here till 2007, and then came back in 2019 and have been here since. The first time around, I was struck by, it was just a steakhouse here, and it was very kind of dull. So that by the time COVID hit, I was so blown away and impressed by how the business scene, the dining scene had changed. So I want you to take us to that moment when news of COVID hit and businesses started shuttering. What was that like for a group of people whose sole focus is amplifying business?
Well, I think us, like the rest of the world, it was surreal. I mean, we thought it was going to be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, okay, a month, okay, 6 months later, we're still here. So then it began to, our efforts began to shift to how do we help businesses stay open? And as I think many of you know, at least what we have seen, the downtowns that fared well are those that had a more vibrant mix of uses. And so our downtown has somewhat of an imbalance of mix. We're 70% commercial real estate. And so when we were living our best life, everybody was coming to work, all was good, because we had people down here working, people who are working have money to go shop, have money to go eat. And so that's when we began to see, and I have to say that prior to COVID, we had already started talking about diversifying the mix of uses, talking about residential conversion. But you know how it is, people don't believe, oh, what is that? We don't need to talk about that. So of course now people think that we're all talking about residential conversion, but those conversations started happening long ago. In the height of COVID, our focus became, how do we help businesses survive? What does that look like? And then beginning to reimagine what life would be like post-COVID, because it changed the world. And so, while there are people who I will stop short of calling them delusional of trying to go back to, we're not going back to pre-COVID, we're not. And so I think there are so many good things that came out of it, and so now it's how do we shift? And so I think the challenge is when you talk about diversifying a mix of uses, as a bid, we have to understand every audience. So not just the property owner, the worker, the property manager, the retailer. So if I own a building and my building is retrofitted to be a commercial building. Now, what does that mean if I really want to convert to residential? And then how do city policies help that? Am I going to make less money? And so all of those things, essentially I'm saying we do not have the answers, what I'm saying. There's no answer, there's no magic bullet, at least that we have found. But in terms of going forward, it's talking about what can we do to continue the pedestrian activity. And Mark, this is probably more in your wheelhouse,
Sure.
so go ahead.
I was about to say I left my magic bullet in the office. No, so Ebony laid out the landscape really well, and just the kind of radical shift that happened with behavior patterns in after the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic. I would say we were over-indexed for office, right? Just a lot of office buildings, and there's various reasons for that. Primarily that it was just the highest and best use in most cases, most of the time, for any real estate developer looking at a piece of land. Like, you could just make the most money by building an office building. And so developers just built office buildings for years and years and years and years. And the shift that happened with COVID and the rise of remote work is that the office attendance, which is one of the metrics we use to track activity downtown, was in the kind of number of fobs in pockets. An average day would be 98% activated, right? Some people are on vacation, some people have a doctor's appointment, but most people are in the office 5 days a week. Fast forward to where we are today, that rate is about 50%, right? So we have a huge drop-off in office workers. Ebony and I, and when I first got introduced to the downtown bid, we worked closely on this planning document in partnership with the Golden Triangle, where I previously was, and our friends at the district government, called the Downtown Action Plan, which outlined it was a roadmap for policies and programs that could revitalize downtown and bring back that economic activity. And what we learned in that was that all of the surveys that our team had done, both on the worker side and then on the employer side, showed that some version of hybrid work was here to stay. And even in a kind of best case scenario, we weren't assuming that we would get more than 60% office utilization, which is translates roughly to be 3 days a week, right? So if that's your baseline for the entire ecosystem of businesses that had operated for years and years, losing 40% of your business, if we cut 40% of your paycheck, you would feel it, right? It's a tremendous amount. And so what we've seen then is just rises in retail vacancy. Our retail vacancy rate is more than double what it had been historically. It's office vacancy rate has also been increasing because firms have realized that they can shrink their footprint. People are coming in less, so you're seeing kind of more hot desking and flexible work arrangements. And sort of many of the challenges that we see are sort of all downstream of that. It's a lack of foot traffic, a lack of demand, and so the work that the bid does, in addition to the clean and safe, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That's the base of the pyramid. And but now we need to welcome more people back and find the policies, programs, changes in uses to replace that source of demand from the daytime worker who is not coming back, to your point, to where they were pre-pandemic.
And Rachel, I just want to say one other thing. When Mark talked about behavior patterns, that's somewhat of where we come in. Most of us, where we live is where we do a lot of business. And so if we have workers, if we don't have the same amount of workers, how do we draw people and get that same activity? Because our goal is we don't want to make people be downtown. We want you to want to come downtown. So it's about what other reasons can we give people to come downtown. Events are a great way that we help to spur that economic activity and that pedestrian activity. So this summer we came off a whirlwind of doing, 10 events, trying to figure out how do we, there are still a lot of assets downtown. Rachel talked about the great dining scene. But what it takes to actually get someone out of their house, to come out, maybe with their husband or with their kids and spend money. It's a lot. How many times you have to hear a commercial or does someone gives you a recommendation to say, hey, come try this great new place. And so events are one of the ways that we help the economy downtown, and we help those businesses because someone may come for an event. So we had a lot of events in an area called Anthem Row, which is downtown. And so we did a ring-sided Anthem Row. So there was like, what is it? Mexican
Lucha
Libre.
Lucha Libre with the
I'm
masks
clearly
and
out of the
stuff,
loop.
and it was super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so people come, they stay, they eat, they may get on the metro, and that's one of the ways that we help to stimulate the economy.
Yeah.
I think the best use of this time is to open it up to questions as soon as possible. But I wanted to ask one more because I think the role of tourism in Washington, D.C. is just so integral and as much or more than many cities, many of these cities. But I wanted to ask for both of your perspectives on where we are right now with, the current political climate and so many things that are going on globally or whatever. How has the bid been able to sort of navigate the local business scene and what people want, and then to also consider tourism and what a tourist wants out of business?
It's challenging, and I will say, we rely a lot on Destination DC, who is the marketing arm for the entire city, and also they have a lot bigger budget than we do. There's always hey, they do more with less, and so marketing is important, but there's so many other things that we're tasked with doing. And so I think tourism, especially in DC, is key because it was by far the largest driver of traffic and pedestrian activity pre-pandemic and probably now. You're talking about thousands of people who come to the National Mall, come to see monuments. We have a wide variety of catalog of things that are free. And so what it means for us is how do we, one, get people off the mall? How do we, two, counteract people's perception? And that's a battle that we've been fighting since the bid started in 1997, and we continue to. Because one story, and you talk about, Rachel was sharing a little bit with us about the program and talking about thinking deeply. One story can snowball about one aspect where now people think it's not safe. And that is not always the case. And what is so key is, I think for me, I'm in a very sit in a very different perspective because I went to school for journalism, so I respect that. But there's and I understand, you have to do what your editor tells you to do or whatever, all those things. But the well-balanced part of it is so key for us because we can be impacted. And I'm watching the conversations on social media. I'm seeing reports and I'm going, I come into work every single day. I take the metro. I'm not afraid to come to work. I don't see what people are seeing. And sometimes it's not always reporters. It's one person's interaction or experience that they had in that moment in time. But then no one hears about one of our ambassadors, someone dropped, this is a true story, their income tax refund check and he returned it. No one talks about, I couldn't find my car and the ambassador walked in the rain 10 blocks to help you find your car. Because I understand that's not sexy. But it's impactful when then people choose not to travel, or they tell people, oh, well, be careful when you go down there because there's this and this. And we've had people who work in our circle say, yeah, I was talking to my mom and she was like, be careful. I said, has your mom ever been to D.C.? Has she ever been to D.C.? Okay, well, please tell her it's safe. But it's those things that we don't, we rely on you, on your eyes, on your ears, on your writing, on your stories to help tell that story. So I think went around the mountain. Don't know if I answered your question, but tourism is huge because there's the regional, local, and national that people rely on that traffic, but there's this mix too with the local communities also.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying, like, hospitality was one of the bright spots in coming out of the pandemic. I'll get my prop here, but we put out an annual data report called the State of Downtown. It's this beautiful document that has a lot of information and charts. Ebony and I worked on this, and we put this out annually just as a barometer of kind of where we are, where we've been, and then where we think we're going. And in here, we're touting some of the successes of the rise or the recovery of the tourist industry. So, largely speaking, of the sort of the major food groups in real estate, right? I already said retail's down, right? Office is down. Hotels were actually about to pre-pandemic levels, like plus or minus, right? We saw average daily rates, ADRs, sort of in the realm of where they were prior to the pandemic. Occupancy rates were strong, and then attendance at our museums, our theaters was just a little bit below pre-pandemic levels, but kind of within spitting distance. Attendance at the Cap One Arena, which is really the anchor of our downtown culture and entertainment district. Saw attendance above pre-pandemic levels. So certainly a positive. We've seen some hotel openings and good investment there. You know, there's over 20 million people visit the mall every year. And so that is I mentioned demand earlier. That is just an incredible amount of demand, right? People coming from across the country, they want to have a good time, eat, enjoy themselves. Particularly international tourists spend rates far exceeding domestic tourists. And so we are excited to have tourists. The other thing I just wanted to touch on was what Ebony mentioned about this perception challenge. And we spent a lot of time in the action plan talking about this tremendous decline in crime rates. So there was, like many cities, you know, rise in crime here in the district in the post-pandemic era. I'm not a sociologist, but you know that many people have written on this, but it was seen kind of uniformly throughout cities. So we experienced what was a national trend. 2023 was our peak year, and a lot of that press, you know, even if it doesn't happen downtown, right? It could be in a neighborhood that's a mile or two away from us, but the perception for somebody like driving in from the suburbs is like, oh, it's like this happened in downtown, even if it was far away. And so we spent a lot of time in here talking about how in 2024 we saw a decline in crime rates to actually, like, our violent crime rate was then below pre-pandemic levels, which was just like very good news because it's important to make people want to come here and feel safe. And it can be really hard to counter that, the narrative sometimes, because the charts and the graphs, they don't get people as excited as they get me excited.
Right. And I'll say one more thing, I'm sorry. It's so important that when we recently did a rebrand, it was focused on the place, downtown as the place, not the organization. And we just relaunched our website with an eye on the visitor. When we started looking at the demographics of who's coming to our website, who's interested, it's visitors. It's local visitors, regional visitors, and national. So I just want to highlight that because that is important, because when people are looking for information, we need to ensure that wherever they find downtown, whether it's social media, whether it's a website, whether it's through a Google search, that they're finding good information, that they're finding the 100 plus white tablecloth restaurants that we have, that they're finding all of the cultural attractions. So it is hugely important, the impact of the visitor, whether that's national, regional, or local.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role of... Oh, I'm Catherine Lynn. I'm from Mississippi Today in Jackson. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role of social media.
Oh my gosh, we don't have enough time, Catherine. Okay, so social media is huge, as we all know. And I think that what we are trying to figure out is how do we balance resources and what story are we telling? And you know, you have to, while we want to stay with the trend, we have to sometimes be very strategic, whether that's placing social ads, whether it's joining the conversation, whether it's not joining the conversation. So I don't know that I have the answer to the role of social media because it's a behemoth that we can't stop. You're giving people a platform where they can talk anonymously and say whatever they want to say. So I think the way that we approach it is how can we make our voice as loud as possible with the messages that people want to hear, you know? So like people don't, on social media, no one cares about what the bid is doing as an organization. Maybe on LinkedIn, you know, follow us on LinkedIn. But on Instagram, it's the restaurants and the why. And then I have to think, I think oftentimes what happens is we get in positions and sit behind a desk and forget like that I'm a mom, I'm a family of 5. give me a deal. I am not going to pay, some people will, those who can do, but like I can't pay $300 for us to all go out and eat. We need a deal. So I have to begin to think about in a real way, what are the messages that people want to see and hear. And it may not be what I want to promote, but the end goal is to get you downtown. So what can I do on social media, whether it's a news story or on our website, to get you to come downtown? So that might not have answered your question, Catherine.
I actually thought more about influencers.
Influencers. Okay, thank you for being specific.
Because Jackson is not a big tourist town, but we had a canoeing company that did really well on TikTok, and they drove a lot of business that way. So I'm wondering about
we absolutely use influencers, and so our strategy is to look for influencers who are covering the topics that we cover, and then that's how we do it. Influencers have a lot more impact than we do, and what we found is that when people go on social media to relax, to be entertained, to be inspired sometimes. Our reach is not as far sometimes as an influencer's reach. So what's key for us is partnering with the right influencers, whether it's for an event or whether it's for a campaign, so they can help us tell the story, because what we know is that the brand capital, people take the brand capital of an influencer over us putting it out, because they just feel like we're trying to sell them. which we are. But we're also trying to tell a story. So influencers are huge, and it definitely has become a key in our social influencer strategy. The challenge is that every influencer is a job and they want to get paid. So we need a bigger budget.
Hi, I'm Rowan with the Dayton Business Journal. I love what you've said about perception so far, and I was just wondering if you have any advice on what we can do as journalists to help improve that perception, in conjunction with kind of those destination, for example, Dayton or other marketing agencies. What can we do to improve it?
I would say that there are a couple of things you can do. Capitalize on what are your strongest assets. A lot of times we are trying to copy what someone else has done, and it doesn't work. Why should they come to Dayton? Did you say Dayton? Is that what you said? Okay, great. What are the reasons? And if you can't give the 30-second, or whoever the organization is, if they can't give the 30-second elevator speech, that's where they have to start on what are the compelling reasons that people should come there. When we first started all those years ago, we did a perception study, and at that time we were still doing things like not virtual, but out on the street actually talking to people to see what was their perception and why do they feel that way. Because it's necessary to know why people have a certain framework, because then you can begin to combat that. Is it true? Is it not true? What are the things that they're saying of why they're not coming, so that you can combat that. I think events are also a great way to drive traffic, and I would say not just a one-time event. If it's a one-time event, it needs to be a signature or something that's happening annually, and it capitalizes on the beauty of that area. Dayton isn't downtown, and you don't have to be. Dayton isn't New York, you don't have to be. But what are those unique things that would bring people to Dayton? One of my favorite commercials is Eminem. He did a commercial for Chrysler during the Super Bowl. You guys remember that commercial? And it was of the Chrysler 300. But the commercial wasn't really about the car. The commercial was about Detroit. And no one had ever used made in the USA. We all see all the time made in China, right? So it was a very strategic campaign, not just about the car, but and one of the things he says is, we're not Emerald City, and we're sure ain't whatever the other city is. And the point was, Detroit doesn't have to be all those things. This is who we are, a city of grit, a city of blah, blah, blah. What is the story of Dayton? And tell that story.
Hello, hi, Judy Farah, editor of Comstock's Business Magazine in Sacramento, California. Sacramento is our state capital.
Okay.
It's a mini DC. We even have our Capitol building looks exactly like yours. Just an anecdote, when I was dropped off by my Uber driver at midnight, Sunday night for this fellowship, first thing he said was, "Oh, this isn't safe here." So that's one
Give
thing.
me his
Yeah,
name.
I was about to say, what's the company? Yeah.
So that's an Uber driver telling a journalist,
Yeah.
you're not safe here. He said, there's a shooting down the street or whatever. On the flip side, I was at Hamilton's last night, and that place was rocking.
Yeah.
So we're having a very hard time in Sacramento. Our downtown is barren because we're everything downtown was a government city. 80% of the workers were government. We have empty buildings that we don't know what to do with. They can't be converted into residential or anything else. They're concrete. They were built in the 50s. So we do have some signature events. We have a downtown sports arena that helps, but I was curious to know what were some of those events that you tried. We're not going to copy them. I just want to maybe be inspired.
Give it a Sacramento spin. You
Yeah.
can.
The one with the mask.
Yeah,
that was
Lucha Libre. No, I mean we have a few signature events that the bid puts on. I would say one of our most central events is our holiday market that's been running for 20 years now.
Yep.
We just had our 20th year.
This year will be the
right?
21st.
This will be the 21st year. Tremendously successful, about a 30-day market featuring different artisans. This year we had food and drink, and then performances on a stage. And the event drew more than 375,000 people. So 30 days? 30 days, yep. And it's become an anchor of kind of holiday DC, right? Holiday downtown. Tremendously impactful for the area and the neighborhood. We did a spending survey of shoppers, and there was about $7.5 million of spending inside the market. And then for every dollar spent inside the market, there was about $1.10 spent outside the market at local businesses. So, it's more than $8 million of economic activity happening. So, I think those like hugely impactful, sustained events are really important, but they're very, take a lot of capacity to produce. They're expensive. It is a huge focus for us and is incredibly important. We complement those kind of signature anchor events then with like lower impact, smaller scale events, a lot of music concerts and events. This like Lucha Libre event was like a sort of a bit of a spin on that, but a single day, single afternoon, we can get a few thousand people down at not too much in terms of staff time or overall expense. And those events are incredibly impactful. The third thing I'd say is that we also will, for our signature events, rather than doing like a one-off, like, oh, it's the Saturday, June 21st, we'll do, what we're doing this month is Thursday Night Out, which is a restaurant, an event in partnership with the restaurants where they're having a buy one, get one incentive. We have a partnership with an app that allows for check-ins. If you check in, it's called Bandwango. If you check in twice, then you can come and get like a free gift card for a restaurant. So, and then we'll have like live music and events, and that's happening every Thursday in September. So we think about that kind of branding a lot because it makes it easier to anchor in people's minds, and then we don't have to spend time sending, which we do spend a lot of time sending emails, but it's helpful when it's just kind of like baked in and easy to remember.
One of the other key things that bids do is placemaking, and a lot of people have never heard, like, what does that mean? Essentially, it's how do you make an area, and that area can be large, it can be small, it can be a sidewalk. How do you make it a place, a destination where people want to come? Sometimes that's through artwork, sometimes that's through small changes like seating. So one of our parks that recently in 2019 was renovated, first time ever where there was a partnership with the National Park Service and a private organization. So like in the history, I don't know if it's the history of America, but but literally the president had to sign it into office that NPS, the National Park Service, would give management authority to the District of Columbia, who would then in turn give us management authority for Franklin Park. Why? Because we have staff, we can manage it, we can activate it, but I say that even because that took 10, 15 years to do. In the meantime, one of the things that we did, a very small placemaking, the park is just over 5 acres and there's a huge fountain there. We just put out tables and chairs during lunchtime. It's summertime, people want to be out, they want to eat. So you give people a place to sit. So small things like that are placemaking things that you can do, and also art activation. One of the things that we've done over the past couple years is to, how can we find areas, whether it's a temporary or public installation. What Mark didn't mention is right now in Franklin Park, there is a Horizon and Emotion art activation. So there are these oversized seesaws, and when you ride them, there's water in the middle, it makes noise, and music. And then there's these cocoons that light up at night and illuminate, and you can just sit in the cocoon and sort of be transported, maybe escape your job for like 30 minutes. But these are small ways to give people respite and to add to that placemaking effect. So that's something you can do. And I'm happy to share some other things online, offline rather.
Hey, I'm back here.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, my name is Rihanna. I work with Capital B News in Gary, Indiana. I have 2 questions, actually. You guys mentioned that there are 13 different bids in the city. So if you guys work together, how do you guys work together for the prosperity of the city? And then my second question kind of goes more so to perception of the city. You know, Gary, as soon as I mention it, people will be like, I hate to be this way. Damn, that's dangerous. It's really not.
I
honestly
actually thought about the Jacksons. I was going to
I was about to say, like, really, a lot of the drama, not to be this way, a lot of the drama in Gary comes from Chicago people just coming over, bringing their drama and stuff like that over there. Again, if anybody from Chicago sees this, my bad. But really, as you know, I know you guys are the business district, but even as a journalist, what advice would you guys have for trying to change that perception to kind of build a city up as a tourist city? Because I feel like, especially in a lot of my work, when you hear about like you said, DC is dangerous. I lived here for like 7 years. It's not, but like I feel like a lot of these cities that people say are dangerous are really cities that have a majority of Black and/or POCs in it. So how do you really, I guess, change that perception so that people will want to come?
Lots of prayer. So I would say we try to keep relationships with the press warm. And I think, we have to understand where you all are coming from. We have to understand that we might pitch a story that you can't run, that you can't whatever. But I think also having a lot of tools in your arsenal so that it's beyond, for us, it's not just restaurants. Mark can tell you about data and what does the data mean. And I think for us, what we have to do is we have to become the aficionados. So like I call myself a big nerd and Mark loves numbers and we geek out about it. And then I had to say, Mark, what's the story? Because if you just tell me no, I don't know what that means. And so one of the things, when it first rang true for me, when I was working at the bid of what we do, we had written a series of white papers. And what we wrote was that downtown is the goose that lays the golden egg for the city. And that the tax dollars that we bring in at that time amounted to the budget of MPD. So that rings true for people like, oh, it's not the haves and the haves not, but this is what allows the city to do some of these other things. So I would say having different ways to report about it and to combat it. And sometimes you got to call a thing a thing. So when someone reports something that's not true, you got to be able and not afraid to come back and say, listen, this is the A, B, C, D, and E. These are the details of what happened. I think people are afraid now. Catherine was asking about social media. You really can't be afraid. I mean, obviously you have to use wisdom. To your first question, the bids, we do work together, but more so on a larger scale in terms of what are policies that benefit all of us. So we have a DC bid council, and they help advocate for work that will benefit us all. I think because our areas are so different and unique, we all have set aside boundaries. There's less of the competition because everybody's got their head down trying to do work, but we may share stories like, okay, what are you doing about this? Okay, what are you doing about that? How do I do this? So that's where that camaraderie and partnership comes into play. And then just for something for you to know, there is an association called the International Downtown Association. So they are the parent, I guess you could say, of all the bids in the world. And so that conference is happening next week where we come together as place management industry professionals to talk about the things that are impacting us. So we'll have lots of off-the-record conversations about the federal impact. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah. I would. Just one thing that I think is really important is we try to be very, honest brokers of what's happening, right? And so it's important both like with the relationships that we have with our local press, but then just anyone, that reputation really matters. And so we want to celebrate the successes when they happen, right? But then at the same time, like if there are challenges or there are problems, we're not going to like shy away from them because I think it's important just to have that credibility when whoever you're speaking to.
For sure.
Hi, I'm Amelia Schaefer. I'm with ICT, which is a Native American newspaper. I wanted to ask, so I live in Rapid City, South Dakota, major tourism town. That's like our number one economic factor. We've got the hills, we've got Mount Rushmore, Badlands, etc. But downtown, despite having a quarter Native American population, there's just one Native-owned business, and I can't think of any other minority-owned businesses in our downtown. Obviously, rent and things like that are a major issue. Our first ever Native restaurant closed within 6 months downtown. And this might not be an easy, I guess, answer right now because we've seen a lot of grants and things dialed back for minority businesses, but what advice do you have for trying to overcome these hurdles and get our community downtown start to make money downtown? Because this is a huge issue we have, is it's not accessible for us.
And so is your question more about getting people of color having businesses? Is that what the root of your question is?
Yeah, do you know of any grants or any opportunities, or how can we get our foot in the door and start to have our businesses downtown?
So it's a loaded question, and I think, I'll just like to be frank. It's a systemic issue. Like, it literally is. The same things that we experience on a larger scale, they trickle down. And so what happens is when you have areas, even where there may be a large concentration of people of color, either the property value has gone down or people of color can't afford to own businesses there because of all the things. You got to get a loan, and then there's roadblocks to get a loan, and then there aren't the same resources. So I think that there's no easy answer. One is, how can you get resources to people who are interested in owning businesses? I think, how can you also maybe use bids and other partnerships to not only create a grant, because a grant is really giving a person a fish. You got to teach them how to fish. And I mean, it is what it is. Do you want them to be open for a year, or do you want them to be open for 5, 10, 15 years? And so the same tools that it takes people who are not people of color to thrive, they need those same tools. So whether it may be a grant, it's got to be a grant, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be resources. And maybe they also need a mentor. We've seen bids across the country do some amazing things. And so I believe it's in Baltimore, the head of the bid there, Shalonda Stokes, there is an area where, so one, they gave grants so that people of color could open businesses. Some of them were pop-up businesses, but it was an entryway into figuring out, can they be more long-term? I think those kinds of programs help. I think also you got to figure out, what kind of businesses do people want? Because listen, people will try to act like certain things aren't a reality. In some areas, you're never going to see some kind of businesses, and people will move heaven and earth so they aren't there. And so, like, for instance, you're not going to see a Dollar Tree downtown. The rent's too expensive. But then that also happens with other types of businesses. So how are those barriers removed? Is it a city thing? Do policies need to be changed? Is it an economic thing where people need resources? What are the major barriers, and who can help you overcome those? And I really should be letting you answer that.
No, I was just going to throw a bunch of acronyms out there. The district government has many policies and programs in place to address some of these long-term structural issues that we have with historically disenfranchised communities. We have our Department of Small and Local Business Development, DSLBD. They have a program called Certified Business Enterprises, or CBEs, which allows for government contracting and like other resources to be available to businesses that qualify. There's also the Department of Employment Services, DOES. They have a first source hiring program where government contracts and some other contracts, at least 51% of all new hires need to be district residents. And so there's like programs there that are, have varying levels of success. The other thing I would say is that, we have perhaps like an analogous issue here in downtown, which is our historic Chinatown, which is adjacent to the arena, that is, it's changing in its demographics as the neighborhood is evolving. And there is a lot of focus and attention from our district leaders about how we can be supporting and preserving the legacy businesses and the owners of the historic Chinatown that have just seen a major drop off in foot traffic and are really struggling. And there's a lot of work and a lot of attention. I don't think we have solved it. and you run into just sort of like matter-of-fact challenges like, sure, there's a new program that, you know, we've perfectly crafted for you as like a legacy business owner in Chinatown to support you with your needs. But then the owner, you know, there could be language barrier problems. There could just be like, they've been running a family restaurant for years, and so like filling out like government forms is not a thing that they're, you know, focused on. And so then it creates a new challenge for providing service and support just to like access the service and support, you know.
They don't have a website, they're not on social media.
Yeah, and you know, even in some of these like restaurant promotions and things that we're doing, like for Thursday Night Out, you know, I mentioned a gift card program. Not all the restaurants in our boundary have gift cards, right? And so like, how do we, you know, so we had to be flexible with some of them to allow for like paper gift certificates that they could honor, so they could still be a part of it. But it's hard.
Olivia Evans with the Courier-Journal in Louisville, Kentucky. And while you were speaking, it was hard to not feel like I was sitting back at home in a Louisville Downtown Partnership press conference, listening to the placemaking with the art, the rebrand of the website and the mission, and the partnering with the right influencers. Like, it was really hard to not feel like I was back home. So if these conversations are happening with every sort of bid or downtown partnership in major metros and smaller cities across the country, is it just a matter of who can do it first and fastest, or is it actually that everywhere needs this exact blueprint to happen, and why?
Wow. I appreciate that. So it's like I'm reminded like of Tolstoy in the opening of Anna Karenina, like all happy families are happy in the same way, and all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. So, you know, I think all downtowns are facing like a similar challenge just with remote work. I mean, it's like remote work is the thing that has changed. And many other towns or cities like DC were a bit of a monoculture for land use. And so we were all over-indexed for office, and the thing in like any natural system, monocultures are inherently unstable because the minute you have a disruptive event, like the system breaks. And so we're in that moment right now. Many of the strategies are the same. Ebony had mentioned the IDA conference that's this next week, and we're all going to be in a room together talking about all of our shared ideas. So I do think there is a typical formula, like all people are very different, but we all sort of like the same things most of the time. And so how, I think it gets back to one of the other earlier questions is thinking about, yes, like it might be art or music, right, culture, but like the culture of Louisville is not the culture of Washington, D.C. And so I'm always thinking about with our programs, how can we be celebrating not just, Washington, like the monuments and the government, but the District of Columbia. Like what's the thing that makes D.C. really special about like our music and our people and our food? And how do we elevate that and celebrate it? And so it might just be, yes, it's a concert, but like my concert is going to look a lot different than your concert probably. And that's a good thing to celebrate.
I agree, but I would say a little differently. I don't think there's the same blueprint. There may be the same tools, but how do you use them? And how does it work for you? You can use a hammer for all kinds of things, not just to put a nail in a wall. And some things you don't need a hammer for. But understanding, when you talk about a blueprint really is specific to what the request is or what the idea or the vision is. So I don't think it's like cookie cutter, but what is the vision? So yes, there are common things that can be used. I think what bids offer are creativity, and we can often be nimble where our government cannot. We can move a little quicker. I don't think it's always moving so quickly, because you can move quickly and run shipwreck. But I think, how can you be creative and think out of the box? So I was thinking about, as Amelia was talking about her question, a similar idea for her and Judy, when you talked about your area in Sacramento being dead right and you can't convert it. One thing that many people have done is they worked with the property owners to do pop-ups in areas that are vacant. Because listen, at the end of the day, people want to make money. So maybe I can't make the same amount of money because it's vacant, but I can get some money coming in and I can get some eyes on my space. Some people, maybe you can do murals. So I also brought annual reports. We did a mural project in an area where they were just like cardboard and didn't look good. I mean, a mural is simple, but it adds vibrancy, it adds life. So I think it's being creative and what tools do I need? And then you may have to put on your startup hat. Let me break this tool so I can make 2 tools for this problem that I have that it looks like no one else has. So that's my answer.
A couple more.
Ashley Murray from States Newsroom. I'll make a quick comment. I live over there on N Street. I go out all the time. I was on U Street last night, Lincoln Theater concert. I walked home. I walk home all the time. It's fine.
We knew we liked you.
I love it here. I love it here. I'm wondering about this narrative of, our administration has angered allies and lots of places he's angered. And so there's this narrative that international tourists are no longer coming to the U.S., and I don't know the facts behind that. I will say I was in Europe 3 weeks ago, and like anybody who heard that I was from Washington, D.C., all they wanted to say was like, oh, Trump has your military there and your federal crackdown. And I'd be like, the place is safe. Like, I love it there. And, so I'm just wondering, is that real? Like, is there a drop in international tourism?
The best place to get that answer is Destination DC. So they recently had their marketing outlook, and Destination DC heavily markets this area internationally. And they did a report. And so if you need our help, we're happy to point you in that direction. And they do a lot of trips, and I forgot what they're called, but during the marketing outlook meeting, they had a delegation from India there to show them, this is Washington, this is what it looks like. I think they were here for like a week or two, and then they were going to go back and write about it. And so that's the part that's important. And so I think that there may be, because I don't want to say that there may be a slight decline in international tourism, but I don't know that it is to the extent that has been reported, but Destination DC can give you the numbers that you're looking for sure. And I think anecdotally, we've seen a decline in certain areas, but not to the extent that people think. People still want to come, but it is real that we have to combat the narrative that, this area is not safe. Like, that's real.
Yeah.
Let's take one more from the back.
Okay.
Hi, Savannah Holly Bates. I'm with KCUR, the public radio station in Kansas City. We have a lot of we have so many CIDs that they're nearly overlapping.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, from your guys' perspective, as the media likely reaches out to you, like how does that collaboration work? It doesn't seem like they collaborate in Kansas City. And so how can the media best reach out to each of these different neighborhood community improvement districts and kind of differentiate them, because they kind of just seem all the same from our point of view. Yeah.
So I think understanding the basic foundations of why they may be different, and I'll give you an example. So as I mentioned earlier, our tax rate is based commercial square foot. In Georgetown, it's based on value. That changes things, because if the value goes down, that means their budget goes down. And so understanding what their goal and their focus is, there are some bids where it's voluntary and the businesses voluntary pay into it, which means that their focus is going to be different, because now if you're voluntary paying into it, then I'm all about small business. So I think understanding those nuances will help fill in the gaps of maybe why they're not talking to each other. The other thing, sometimes it's just real and it's basic. People have small staffs. So we are an anomaly. We are, I think we have the largest budget of them all, 19 plus million, I should know.
It's in the annual report.
It is, so you can find it in there.
Yeah.
And we have a staff of 30 plus.
Yeah.
We're an anomaly.
Right.
There are a lot of people, it's 2 people. And they're doing the best they can to hang on. So some of when you're saying what it may appear like they don't work together, could be they're just trying to survive and they just may not have time.
Yeah.
So I would say understand the nuances first, and then whatever information you need, figure out who can get you what you need. So Mark talked about that State of Downtown report. We also have a data dashboard on our website where people can get the information, but that took us a long time to do, to actually get it to a place, and he still has to populate it. So understanding who can give you the information you want. And then I would say, how can it be a win-win? What do you need, and what is it that they need to help someone maybe go that extra mile to cross those bridges and gaps for you?
Yeah, I'd say just briefly that many of these smaller placemaking organizations, they're very bootstrapped, but they are by far the best resource for connecting with owners, understanding like issues, because one of the foundational roles of a place management organization is just convening people and like leading discussions and just being like the kind of like the hub of the spoked wheel, and so even if they don't have the data, they can connect you with a local person or just whatever exactly the story is. We are unique in that, downtown, it's in the name, right? So it's like, oh, downtown DC. People don't know what my boundary is. They just like hear downtown and it's like whatever their mental map creates, like that's what our boundary is. And so we can play in that space sometimes because people I think look to us as a resource. And we are, fortunately have the resources so we can actually do the analysis, and I can get into the charts and the graphs and the retail data to understand what's happening in a way that smaller bids can be really good at what they do, but they just don't, it's just not a focus.
Ebony Walton and Mark Simpson of DC Bid, I am very tempted to lock the doors and keep you in here for the rest because this has stimulated such incredible ideas for stories and insight and context. So let's take this opportunity now to show them our appreciation for joining us this morning.